Okay, I think we're live now, Adele. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. Great to be here.
Good. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It's been years since we've actually seen each other in person.
It's been a very long time. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
great to see you.
yeah, good to see
You
you
look
too.
fabulous.
Thank you. So do you. I
I
like
love
your,
your hair.
thank you.
I know. I just love it.
So we met at a networking event for, I think, entrepreneurs. We met through, I think, a mutual coach that we had both had
Yes,
for
Erin.
entrepreneurs.
Oh no,
No,
Nadine.
it was
Yeah,
Nadine.
yeah.
And then you introduced me to Erin.
That's right.
That's right.
That's
And
right.
so we decided that we should start up a group, right, of masterminds and get together as, all solopreneurs at the time and brainstorm and support each other in really getting our businesses up and rolling. And we met regularly for a little while, and then I haven't seen you in years.
I know.
So, and I know that your business has evolved uh,
Yes.
over that time. Can you share with us what you do?
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting actually that take you back to those days with when we mastermind, which you actually put together. You said, I want to do this. And I'm like, okay, that sounds good.
Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah.
yeah, like it's been a long time. And yes, it has morphed. Um, but to fill you in, I actually don't know if I told you, I actually went back and did some speech pathology work
Mm-hmm.
as part of really the income. Because coaching, it's very hard to do and make a living at.
Yeah.
One-on-one coaching, and I thought at the time it was going backwards, but what it gave me, and this is relevant to your question, is I've always had a love of child language development, especially narrative development in children. It's
Mm-hmm.
fascinating, fabulous. I love working in that world with kids and parents. And what it did was gave me that, it reminded me how much I love that.
Mm.
And I've always self-identified as a lousy storyteller. And so I never saw working with the people I coach and story, I never saw those two things together, but that's what's emerged for me. And so that's been pretty
Fascinating.
fun. I work with, oral storytelling.
That's very cool. And so you've
Yeah.
been a speech pathologist for years,
Yeah. 25 years.
25
Yeah.
years, right? We
Yeah.
both worked in the public system.
Yeah.
And then you decided to be an entrepreneur and you did all kinds of coaching certifications
Mm-hmm.
through CTI.
Yep. CTI. And then I just recently got certified as a narrative coach practitioner.
Right. And I think that's
Yeah.
fascinating what you're saying about how you went back into speech pathology and it helped surface for you
Oh yeah.
this theme of narrative storytelling,
Yeah. Yeah.
which has
If
been an
I
interest obviously for a long, long time, but you just couldn't name that.
Right. Right. And
And
I've
now
always
you
seen
have.
the power of story. Always. And always wanted to do something with it. And actually this is so fascinating because you, Maureen, you did storytelling with our mastermind group.
Yeah, I found storytelling fascinating for years as well. I love a good story.
Yeah.
And I sometimes feel like I'm a really good storyteller and sometimes I feel like I'm a really cruddy storyteller, like I just can't come up with it.
Mm.
But I love a good story. I love how it
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
hits you in the heart, right? Hits you in the feels, and how
Yeah.
you remember concepts through, I do anyway, through
Yeah.
story.
Yeah. You're a
And so,
fabulous storyteller,
well, thank
actually.
you.
Yeah. You are.
Thanks.
You are.
Sometimes not so much. Sometimes I could put you to sleep, but I think, so what do you do now with that? So you love narrative story. You've got a certification in narrative story.
Mm-hmm.
And
Narrative
so
coaching.
narrative coaching. So
Yeah.
how does that show up for you now in your
Yeah.
work?
Well, a couple ways. One, I developed and ran a course for a small business uh, for the staff and took them through a story-based leadership course. So it
Okay.
was 22 hours. So it was quite a commitment, and um, it was a fun experience. It was I have all the outcomes for the course, but then delivered it in a non-linear way. So it
Yeah.
wasn't like from module 1 to module 2 in that kind of way. It was like, well, let's see what stories are present and then use those as they come to hit the course objectives. So that's a ton of fun. And that's part of what I do. And the other part is I bring women together. I run one with the intention of kind of setting them up with oral storytelling and then letting them be more like a book club where
Mm.
they have the skills and knowledge to be together as a group and support each other in their oral telling. Because you don't have to, the best part of storytelling is you just get together with people with the intention of telling stories, and that alone is worthwhile. But giving them some experience and some frameworks to work with, they could take it and run with it. So that's my intention, although this group said, oh no, we want to do round 2. So I'm doing round 2 with them. Yeah. So that's what I will be offering again is a round 1. It's focused on personal storytelling.
That's so interesting. So, are there common themes in storytelling, no matter what the genre is? Like, I'm thinking about, you talk about business storytelling, like
Mm-hmm.
storytelling in leadership. And I know I use story a lot in leadership facilitation and training.
Mm-hmm.
And, I want to learn how to write a story that has humor in it. Like, I think
Mm.
that's a whole other ball of wax, right? There's, so narrative work. So what are are there common components to a story, no matter what
Mm. Mm-hmm. There
your
are.
your purpose is?
Mm-hmm. There are common. So uh, well, it'll take you back to probably your high school writing. I don't know if you did anything past high school, but there's the setting. Like you take the listener and you give them the context. You let them see what's going on. So the setting is the who, where, and when.
Mm-hmm.
And then something happens. Like, there's a problem, or there's some event happens that changes something.
Mm-hmm.
And then so the problem then gets resolved, and then you have the resolution to it. So that's basically it. But great stories show a change, and they have a emotional impact. So
Mm-hmm.
that problem piece, if said well, and you can bring the listener into it, the listener actually has a neurological response. Like cortisol is released as a stress response.
Stress,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
They
And
feel
then,
it with you, yeah.
oh yeah, exactly. And in the end, when there's resolution, there's an oxytocin release. And
Yeah,
so you also feel that in your
which
whole
is
body.
pleasure, like dopamine, oxytocin, calming.
Yeah.
What's oxytocin
Yes.
hormone
It's
do again?
calming.
Yeah,
It's like, yeah.
I always think of oxytocin in terms of labor and delivery,
Yes.
which is not how we.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. So there is a pattern to a good story, right? There is a build up to a problem. We're feeling with the antagonist of the story, and then there is a resolution and
Mm-hmm.
a dopamine or oxytocin hormonal release. That's so interesting. And that then is what then imprints the memory, helps us to remember concepts through
Yes.
story.
Yes. Yeah.
Because so you ever think about, an event in your life that had a huge impact on you, you could probably, that moment when something happens, when you ask people to describe it, they can talk about the room, what they were wearing, smells. Like that imprint is so strong when there's a
Yes.
high emotional response to something.
Yes.
And yet when there isn't a high emotional response, it's just like, I don't remember I don't remember how I got here. I was thinking about something else. Or it's so interesting, how memory just like with emotion.
Mm-hmm.
I find that
And,
so fascinating.
yeah. And those moments of big emotional impact, if you're looking for a story to tell, that is like a story moment.
Yeah.
And that's what you use to build your story with, is that moment.
Yeah, right. All right, Adele, then I'm going to ask you the broken open question, because I mean, what
Mm.
you're doing and what I'm doing are so similar. I mean, stories are about usually resilience.
It can be.
I remember one time I went to my manager in public health, and we were all looking at resilience, because we were looking at how do we build resilient communities, resilient school communities, resilient
Mm-hmm.
communities. And so we were studying resiliency models. And I remember saying to her once, oh, you should read this book. I think it was The Glass Castle. I said, you should read this book. It's a great story of resilience. And she said, just about every story is about resilience in some way.
Hmm.
Made me think.
I'll have to go take a look at that. Because my first thought was, oh, there's a ton of resilience. Definitely change.
Overcoming something, change,
Yeah.
before and after. Like,
Yes.
this happened, and this was my challenge, and this is what I learned.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's kind of what the theme of this podcast is as well. It's about, I say broken open, in which, and when we were talking the other day, you said, man, that's such a vulnerable
Mm-hmm.
statement. I'm like, yeah, it really kind of is. And you don't have to think about this question from like that heavy word or phrase, like breaking open. That was my experience.
Mm-hmm.
But I think breaking open there can be grades of it, right? There can be a little change, or there can be a huge crack in a very, very thick shell, which is what I experienced. But I mean, so the question is, tell me about a time, or share with us a time when you experienced some challenge or adversity that at the time felt like the end of the world. It felt like, what am I going to do?
Mm-hmm.
And in hindsight, has proven to be a real gift in that it taught you something about resilience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. I love the question. And my mind's going like five. Story that comes to mind with this is when my kids were really young. I was the one to stay home with them. And
Mhm.
I thought that that would be an awesome thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah. I thought it would be like, oh, this will be cool. We'll play all day.
Mm,
Yeah. And I made less money than my partner. And so it made sense for me to stay home.
yeah.
And so with the baby years were really fuzzy. I didn't get much sleep, and they were fuzzy. But I started to have this sense of I am more than a parent.
Yes.
And I felt that I was getting suffocated in parenthood. And I
Right.
love my kids. Like, they're amazing, and they're 14 and 15 now. And so they're turning out okay. And even in the COVID context, we're doing
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
But there was a point where I realized that parenting wasn't enough for me, and
Mm.
being a wife, it wasn't enough for me. And I didn't want to go back to, I had been a leader in speech pathology, and I picked up some part-time work and some casual coverage, and I just didn't want to do just straight clinical work anymore. And I felt so, I felt so, I don't even know what the word is. So unseen, so untapped, so, yeah. And so I had to decide that that wasn't what I was going to be doing.
Mm.
I needed something my own. I needed something really interesting, but I felt was super valuable. I needed to be in a context where I wasn't seen as an add-on. And so I thought at the time I was saying goodbye to my work as a speech pathologist, to be honest with you. And then I thought that was over for me, and it wasn't over, but certainly moving forward in a different way was required. Or I would have been a miserable bitch if I hadn't have changed my course.
How old were your kids when you were starting to figure that out?
1 and 2.
So young.
Young.
What was the internal conflict for you when that was happening? Like, what was it? As simple as I woke up one day and I realized, I think I want something more? Or was it more of a battle than that?
It was more of something small that just grew and grew and grew. So this internal battle, and it was the rub for me was that I really felt I should be satisfied as a parent and as a
Yeah.
wife and as a I could, what was wrong with me? Like I didn't have to work because I'm married to somebody who makes enough money for us to. I don't have to work, and so and people didn't understand it. They're like, Adele, you've got it made. Like my friends could not understand why. At least that's how I felt. Why I was so miserable.
Hmm.
Because I should be happy.
Oh man, that should, right? Like
Yeah.
I so understand that. When I have the feeling that I should be able to be content, be okay with, but somehow I'm not, there is such judgment.
Mm.
And it's so hard to move forward with getting honest about what's really going on and accepting it. So
Mm.
coming to terms with the fact that being a stay-at-home mom was not fun or fulfilling, I can see where that would be a real climb. I hated it too, honestly.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I did. I found
Yeah.
it really hard. And I do say to other parents now, I say, being the person at home is tough. I see the
Mm-hmm.
value in it. I do see
Mm-hmm. Oh
value
yeah.
in it, but
Mm-hmm.
man, it's not an easy job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, I did not enjoy it either. And I wasn't very good at it, I wouldn't say either.
Mm.
I was lazy.
Mm. I bet we could harvest some amazing stories out of there.
Maybe, maybe. I probably had some good moments, but man, overall, I just felt like unmotivated. I felt like, man, I don't enjoy babies and toddlers as a rule. Like it's just not like I enjoy angsty teenagers. That's my favorite age. So yeah, it was hard to be at home with little kids that were just moving and making a mess all the time. That's what it felt like.
Oh yeah, you can't get ahead on anything. Everything is this cycle, like the laundry, the cooking, this nothing looks completed.
It never is. And you might have a plan for the day, and then the juice gets spilled, somebody has a fit. Like it's just like you're constant setbacks is what it feels like. And the job is never done.
Yeah, it's
Like
never done.
there's no satisfying moment where you go, oh, look what I accomplished. There's none of that.
Yeah.
It's like, oh. Okay. So what did you learn about yourself in that process?
I learned that I needed something really interesting. Yeah, I needed something interesting. I needed to contribute to something larger than myself and
Mm,
my family.
mm-hmm.
I learned that I needed to say out loud what I needed, to not just keep it inside.
Mm, I understand that too. And so when you um, finally started to figure that out, you think, I'm meant to be more than a parent, you said. And I so relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
I remember being buried in parenting our kids, especially when they were teens and they were struggling. And I remember actually saying in a group therapy session, I'm meant for bigger things than this. And I couldn't probably have told you exactly what that was. I just knew there was more to me than this. I wasn't born to wear an apron and bake cookies, which is what I thought motherhood was supposed to be, and it never was. But so what do you think? You were meant to be more than a parent. What are you meant to be? Do you know yet?
Mm-hmm. When I grow up, hey, what are you
Yeah,
gonna be
I
when you grow
know, I
up?
know. This is the
Yeah,
$1 million question, isn't it? Like, what
yeah.
is that?
What's been the theme for me is helping people see the invisible.
Mm,
Like, um, a story's great for that because through story you can surface what seems to be invisible. And through coaching, that's what I help my clients do.
mm-hmm.
Um, Yeah. So that parable totally resonates with me. The one about the fish. There's two fish swimming along in the ocean, these two young little fish.
Mm-hmm.
And they see a wise fish coming. And as the wise fish approaches, the wise fish says to the two little fish, um, how's the water? And they just swim by. And the one little fish says to the other little fish in a little while, what's water? And the other guy goes, I don't know. And
Yeah.
off they swim. So
Yeah.
it's like there's stuff all around us that's invisible that we're not seeing. I love that.
And so when you see someone, one of your clients, uncover something that was previously not visible to them,
Mm-hmm.
that's, I'm guessing, what lights
Yeah,
you up.
totally lights me up. And your wording with that was perfect. When clients discover something, because that's what our work is, right? We help them discover. And if they can discover on their own some of the hard stuff, it's so much more powerful than being told. There's definitely times to tell people stuff, right? Like there's knowledge that needs to be passed on. That's
Mm-hmm.
one thing, but
Mm-hmm.
recognizing something about yourself,
Mm-hmm.
we don't do really well, and other people tell us that.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, and so this is sort of the theme of coaching. So when I've taught a coaching course before, but I've not done the certifications that you've done. And one of the distinctions that I make with coaching is the difference between coaching and mentoring. So coaching, right, is a perspective that the client has all their answers, has the answers that they need. They have the wisdom within them. And your job is to simply help them to uncover that wisdom by showing a new perspective through questions. Is that correct? Anything you'd add?
questions and other ways, yes.
Okay, other ways
Yeah.
like what?
Like working with morphogenic field, like you can take somebody to
Oh,
a place and time or into somebody else. It's
oh,
fascinating.
that's
No, we haven't
interesting.
done. Okay, yeah. Oh, we should do that sometime. It sounds really woo-woo, but it isn't. You're just surfacing patterns that the person has recognized but yet hasn't seen yet. So there's nothing woo-woo about it. You're just accessing their knowledge in a way that they haven't accessed it before.
So tell me more about that. What do you do? Or how do you
It's
do
like,
that?
have you had a guided imagery session where you close your eyes and you get relaxed, and then you go maybe to go to a safe space, and then that kind of thing? You had that experience?
Yeah, yes, sort of. Like, I mean, I've done guided meditations and I've
Mm,
done some EMDR therapy that, had me create a room that was a safe space, etc.
mm, yeah.
So something like
Yes.
that.
It's very similar, but it can to be your own child is actually really fascinating. And that's where I was first exposed to this work, was through Gonan and Johan Premfors. It's a takeoff of a CTI training that I did for coaching. They do a leadership program, and this was a takeoff of that, but it was for parenting.
Was
So
that
that's where I first
parentology?
came across
Is that the
parentology. Yeah,
parentology?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. I think they're currently only offering it in Dubai right now, but I'll give you a link for that. It's a
Okay.
fascinating program, and so we had to become our kids. Oh, this was just fascinating. So I became my daughter, who at the time was about 10 or 11.
Okay.
And so whoever was guiding me, so I was my daughter. And one of the things that came up through the questioning while I was being her was that she wanted a new best friend, or she wanted a best friend. She never had a best friend, wanted a best friend. And so I came home and talked to her about that. She goes, "Oh no, I'm fine now. Like I got lots of friends. I don't need a best friend." And I'm like, "Okay, well that's weird." But then a series of events happened, and like a week and a half later, she had a best friend, like a true soul best friend. And who, like, yeah, that part's a bit woo woo. Because
Well,
I'm
that's
like,
wild.
Yeah, but and maybe it wasn't related. Maybe what you could say, well, that would have happened anyway. And I'm like, yeah, it could have, but it opened me up to her, what she really desired, even though she thought she was done with that desire. And it opened up that conversation with us, and who knows why, who knows, like, but I've done it with clients before, and they have discovered things. And I've done it with a, a client who has a child who has you can't really understand very well. And what they unearth about their child isn't something that is totally new to them, but they see it in a different way. They get the real view through their kids' eyes, and they see
Well,
things.
that would be
It
fascinating.
is fascinating. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, as you're talking, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like to imagine to step into my kids'
Mm-hmm.
experience from
Mm-hmm.
their point of view. It's almost scary, honestly, to think about. It's a little bit scary. It's like, oh,
Well,
what am I going to
uh,
see here?
it's but you might feel scared for sure. I mean, but it's such a cool thing, because really you love your kids. Like,
I
it's such
do.
a place of love that you're playing in, that, yeah.
It is such a place of love, but I think for someone like me, and this is why it's scary for me. So maybe it's not scary for everyone. My biggest fear is not being the mom my kids need me to be. So to step into their experience and see from their point of view how I may have failed them scares the shit out of me. Even though they tell me, they tell me, you got nothing to worry about here. But I'm like, oh my God, what if I see myself in a way that I don't want to see myself? Ugh, ugh, you're killing me here. This is a
Yeah.
whole other like. Anyway, but it would also be what a great empathizing exercise, a great exercise in
Yeah.
empathy, right? And
Yeah.
it's seeing the
It,
world from your kid's perspective,
yeah.
especially if
And
you're struggling to understand your kid.
yeah. And it may actually help you access the truth that they are telling you of, no, no, this isn't you. This is not a shortcoming of you, that you didn't do something.
Yeah, and that for me is the ongoing battle of so this is cognitively, and I do believe this, they've got their own journey, they've got their own path. you know my kids have told me, Mom, I'm like, well, what if I had done this differently, or what if I had done this differently? And they're like, Mom, why? So that you could go from being a 95% parent to a 95.5% parent? Like, come on, like really, like, you couldn't have changed this path, you couldn't have made me not an addict, or you couldn't have
Mm-hmm.
you couldn't have done that.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand that they've got their own path to walk, but at the same time I'm terribly afraid that maybe I should have done something different, or I don't know.
See, there you go.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know, wait a minute, it's kind of
Yeah.
calling my own BS here.
Yeah, you just did. Love it.
Yeah,
There's a
yeah,
total energy shift there too.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
no. Huh. Okay, I got some work to do. That's so interesting. So
You
I didn't
just
realize that. I thought that in my mind, coaching was all conversational
mm,
and questions. So
mm-mm.
this is interesting. You use multiple techniques to help uncover perspective and um, possibility for clients.
Absolutely. Whatever the client needs,
Oh, that's
you
so interesting.
yeah, there's somatic work where you really like, you want to cut off the head and just get into the body. The body is so
Yeah.
wise and so untapped. We
Mm,
spend so much time in our head.
that's interesting.
Yeah. So getting into the body for answers is, yeah.
Fascinating stuff. Because when I think about the way I define coaching is what I already said. And there's so much more to it than that, obviously. And then I think mentoring is the telling.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
mentoring is I have wisdom, I have experience in this area. I'm going to take you under my wing, save you some angst by sharing my wisdom, knowledge, and experience with you. And you can
Yes.
do what you want with it.
Yes. And there's a part of what you do that I'm thinking is that I can't save you from the angst. It's yours to have.
Yes.
But I will walk with you with some of this so that you're not alone.
That's true.
So
Well, so in my
that,
work, I do what I call a fairly heavy mix. Well, probably more mentoring than coaching even. And so that's why I call it consulting. Right.
yeah,
So you
yeah.
would consult with me to say, so Maureen, this is the experience we're having, and I use story to say, well, yes, and I relate to that. Here's a story where, you might see me different, my behavior that maybe didn't work, and hopefully they'll see themselves in that.
Yes.
Right.
That's a fabulous point.
Right. I want them to see themselves in my story of what I did or didn't do. And then, say, well, here's what I wish I had done differently, or here's what I wish I had known. And let them pull from that what they will. So it's a little bit more of the mentoring than coaching that I do. But I do some coaching. I do ask some questions. I love this idea of the story. So so when's your next program, Adele? I'm going to challenge you. When are you going to run this women's storytelling group again? Do you know?
Yeah. Well, since September, I'm going to run a couple of groups in September.
Okay.
So I kind of curate the group. That's my intention. Is the first one is highly curated, and so it's important to me to bring in people, because what happens is, yes, I lead in terms of I create time and space and structure and give guidelines around stories. And there's so many different ways to look at story. And we play with story, but the group, it's the group that the real magic happens. It's the cross, like when we're harvesting stories, it's the cross harvesting. Oh my gosh, that reminds me of this, and that reminds me of this. So the group is really important, and to have this safe space, and for it to be like for there to be ripple effect out of this. So maybe it's the reason why they want to be better with story is also part of the reason why they come together. So I see continuing to curate the groups that work together.
So you're hand selecting people to be in these groups.
Yeah.
To form a group with a certain dynamic.
Yeah. So my first, it's obviously people who I already know are easy, right? Because I can see the connections. I love seeing and connecting people. That's one of my joys in life, actually.
Yeah.
I think as a matchmaker in another life.
Yeah. Awesome.
The fact that you and Aaron are still connected is like, boom.
You nailed it. Yeah.
So, but I anticipating bringing more people into my world through like some small conversations one-on-one and some small group kind of webinar-y stuff, just to give people an exposure to how I work and see if it's something that they're interested in. And then once I have a sense for who they are and they have a sense for who I am, then to create a group that they fit into.
The relationship's everything, isn't it?
It is.
This comes up over and over and over again. The relationship is the work.
It is. It's, yeah. And there's tons of storytelling stuff out there. Some great people doing amazing things. And there's storytelling courses you can go to. And I just saw something locally that, like you can go learn how to tell a story, but the true work comes in being in community and sharing story in community, because that's how we're wired for things to keep going on. Storytelling is not meant to be an individual.
No, like I'm thinking back to, some of our, indigenous, where story is passed on from generation to generation, and it's all verbal. or in the past has been verbal.
Yes. And we were verbal so long before we had written language.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were verbal. Oh my gosh. Like, yes, I've been, Indigenous storytelling has been a gap in my world. And so I'm getting more resourced and curious. And I have to tell you, there's just, there's so much knowledge and wisdom we need to catch before it dies. That's
Yes.
my feeling. And I'm still so uninformed, but
Yeah, that's true. And I'm almost feeling a little bit of that. My daughter was asking me questions about my parents, my home, my grandparents and their home last night. And I'm so grateful for these opportunities to tell them about where they come from, the people that they come from,
yeah.
because it's not written down, and it's not something I'm going to sit down and say, so guys, there's something you need to know. So just through, I'm like so anxious. I'm almost creating opportunities for these kinds of unstructured time with my kids, and getting into, you know, here's how it was, guys. Like, here's the people you didn't know in our family, and here's the dynamic, and here's the perspective, here's the stories they told me about when they were, their formative experiences. And I just feel this sense that I need to pass this on a little bit.
Yes, because you don't want it lost,
I
because it will
don't want
get
it
lost.
lost. I don't want them to wake up one day and go, I wonder what my great grandmother was like.
Yes. And it's interesting. I'm gonna just take you with me for a second here while I
Okay,
open the
let's
door for
go.
my dog.
Okay.
Sorry.
Doggy needs out. I get that.
Yes.
It's all
And she's
good.
like, I've been patient and you're totally ignoring me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
um and that's so powerful in and of itself, to be the reason why to go into story. But what I found myself, like, so I don't know if I identify as a lousy storyteller. I think
You
so.
told me that before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I don't know. Like, that's funny. Yeah.
And so I went digging for evidence of why, right? So then I have I went digging for a story that, like, well, why do I identify? Like, what is it? So it's 1972, and I'm eating tuna casserole at the kitchen table. I just love tuna casserole, and my sisters hate it, so it's awesome. So sitting there,
That's awesome.
it's it's dark outside, and my socks are wet, and my family, we sit around this little wooden table that has two leaves that fold down.
Yes.
Those.
Yeah.
So I share with one of my sisters, and the oldest sister's across the way. I'm the youngest, and then my mom and dad. And the table just comes to mind so clearly. The conversation at the dinner table is fast and furious and dominated by my sisters. Like, they're 3 and 4 years older than me, so they're just going at it, and I'm sitting there, and you might think I had nothing to say, but I do. I just can't get into the conversation. I can't feel the pause, and I can't listen and also talk. So I just look like I'm sitting there. Finally, my dad goes, "Okay, everybody be quiet. Delsey's got to speak." I'm like, okay. So they all look at me. They're all quiet, and they have nothing to say. Nothing to say.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, that's what I came from. That's what I came from.
Interesting.
That's my story I found and what I wanted to share with you is I went into that to find a story, to show something, because there's so many pieces into it. That's why I relate to these kids that I've worked with who aren't heard because their speech isn't good or their language is delayed. Like, they're not invisible, they're there. Like, that was a really interesting thing. And the other thing was, I actually was back there with my dad, and my dad saying, "Be quiet, Delzy has something to say." And it was like, holy shit. Like, like, it was just such a moment of appreciation for him.
Yeah.
And it was awesome. And I wouldn't have wouldn't have come back to me if I hadn't dug into the story and took myself really back to that moment.
Wow, that's so fascinating.
So when you talk about wanting to pass on family history, I say, yes, absolutely. And you'll find stuff in there that, like, it's like diamonds.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, my daughter was here last night. She stayed the night with me, and we had a couple of hours of just sitting on the sofa, just chatting about um, my family, and some things came up actually that I was like, oh, I forgot about that. That helps me. I forgot, I need to remember that. What I hear you saying is just so it just comes through the screen at me, your passion for giving kids the ability to talk, right?
Yeah.
And then I also hear the importance of creating space
Yes.
for people to speak.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
know people cringe at that creating space because I think it's overused a little bit
Yeah.
now.
No.
But what I'm remembering when you say that, when you tell that story about your dad saying, okay, be quiet, everybody, is when I was doing my master's in leadership, and we were talking about the difference between introvert and extrovert, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your sisters are clearly extroverts.
Well,
well, I
actually,
would
they're
say
not.
anyway. Well,
They're not.
at the table, they
They
were.
are in the family. They are.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So they were. Yeah, I shouldn't assume they were extroverts, but I am
Yeah.
one. And first to speak, assertive, stepping into the conversation, no problem with that. And learning that not everybody operates that way.
Yeah.
And that as a leader, my job maybe is to speak last, right? And try to work out of preference to create some room for others in the room who don't necessarily jump in and speak first, and to allow them. And the gems that have come out of a conversation when I can just be quiet and listen. And also I use it in facilitation when I ask a question. I'll pause almost to an uncomfortable length of time for the people in the room that need to formulate a thought before they verbalize it. I'm not like that.
I know, you're
right?
very sharp.
Well, I just fast. I blah, 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 blah. And but not everybody operates that way. And so how do you then create the opportunity for those people that need a bit of time to formulate a thought, or
and you just explained it beautifully, how to do that.
Yeah, it's so important.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's a whole whack of people out there that are eating their tuna casserole, right? With their head down, and are waiting for, like, have thoughts that they want to verbalize or say something, and there's no gap, or they can't find the gap. And so then it is assumed that they have nothing to say when they actually have a lot to say. It's amazing. And so your passion then for helping people to pull that story together so that they're ready. Yeah. When someone says, everybody be quiet.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, God, it just hits me here.
You could just see the value of just being in conversation with people and being that way with them. Like what you just offered to people listening is that, not everyone operates that way. And sometimes we need to give them more space. It's not that they don't know something.
No, or don't have a thought, or like I say, golden. Yeah. All the valuable information that I think I need to bestow on others. I often, when I could zip my mouth shut, there was way more wisdom in the room better ideas, certainly my ideas, and more when I could
Mm-hmm.
be quiet.
Mm-hmm.
And as a leader, that was eye-opening. It was like, holy shit,
Mm-hmm.
I need to be quiet and
And
listen.
not quiet because you don't have something to say,
Mm-mm.
but quiet so that there can be more voices, more of other perspectives that are influencing whatever needs to
Mm-hmm.
happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there's people who don't work in my preference, like that out there that need
Mm-hmm.
space
Mm-hmm.
to step into it. Oh,
And then
that's
there's
so
people
cool.
like me that need to just step into the verbal place more to be more like Maureen Towns in a conversation.
Well, well, I don't know about that, but I think maybe just be more Adele in, you know, in the room, right? Like just speak
Yeah, yeah.
and like create this. I like what you said about building community and curating a group, because it creates a safe place for people to explore that story. And as a leader, my job is to do that as well, to create a safe space for people to express themselves
Mm-hmm.
and explore.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's fantastic. So you do some really, really interesting work. You've got a lot going on in the way that you coach, whatever the client needs. You're building capacity for people to pull themes and stories together. And how are you then gonna? You talked about community, so I can see how the community is built while the group is
Mm-hmm.
going. But
Mm-hmm.
how are you facilitating the community beyond that?
Mm-hmm. But it's interesting because I have this vision that these small communities exist for this deep work, but that there's also a larger community that they belong to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's like right now I host office hours with my group that I've said, just so you know, there will be another group that may be popping in
Mm,
for office hours. And so I see this opportunity to cross-pollinate these groups and to
great.
also bring them together for some content and interaction and storytelling. The Zoom is the best place. I actually developed this to be on Zoom, and then look
Mm-hmm.
at us, we're all stuck on Zoom.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah,
but so because it offers this opportunity to be in a large group and then break into breakout rooms and do some more focused, so everyone can talk. Actually, everyone can talk and everybody can listen and do their story work. So your question about is your question related to a larger community from that?
yeah.
Maybe.
I'm just what I'm
Yeah.
thinking about is that I see that
Yeah.
the value, and I know you've alluded to this before, of having an ongoing community. You know, like you say, so you've got this group, and this other group may be coming in, and I see the population of this group growing
Yeah.
over time as your groups sort of work through their programs and then get to know each other and have a space to come back into the work that you've done with them
Yes. Well, and
when they
it's
want it, right?
yeah. And onto that question, yes, there's that piece of coming in and then going big, but there's also this other piece of community where I'm I have I'm starting a book. That's when you said that your book's really quite close to coming out. I'm going, holy, you've done a lot of work, because it is a lot of work. But and it actually goes to what you and I were talking about is I have pieces of this work that are in me that are, of course, really just compilations of many, many other people's work, but that I want to put out into the world bit at a time and get some interaction on that. So there is a
Okay.
community piece of that that I want to build and bring people into, especially people who aren't already in my world, to bounce some of this off of, and like you said, just to give it out there and then be quiet and hear some
Yeah.
other voices to it, because then it gets really rich. It's not
Yeah.
just my translation of other people's work coming out a different way, but it's also an interactive piece. So I do have a Facebook place for this to happen, and it's called the Story Edge.
Okay.
So in Facebook, I'll give you the link.
And is the Story Edge, is that something that people join after they've been through your program, or is that something that I could pop into now?
You could pop into, absolutely.
Okay, I'm excited to pop into there.
Yeah, so it's just this at the very early stage of saying, well, let's interact with story.
Oh, I love it.
And story is so much more than just telling a story. Like, there's story listening, there's story catching, there's story holders, there's story holding. There's so many pieces to being with story that's not actually telling a story. That's,
oh my gosh, this is
fascinating.
So cool. Yeah. Oh, I see us doing quite a bit of work together, Adele. I do.
Oh yeah. I love that
things are firing up in my head as you're talking. I'm like,
oh yeah. Oh, the stories that we tell ourselves. Yeah, we've talked, you and I, a bit about that.
Oh yeah, the stories that we get stuck in, the stories that we cement, right, about who we are and how we fit in the world and why we're so angry. You know, like.
Yes. And some stories just need to be surfaced, said out loud, and let go, just to get out of the way. And it's not that you can't say it to yourself in the mirror as effectively as a nice small group. Just get it out, and then I'm free.
To write a story and to read a story, they sound very different.
Yeah.
Have you had the experience of telling a story about your childhood home and your sister's going, what? No, that's not how it was.
I told the older sister in this, and she was bawling, crying. I'm like, what? And she says, I had no idea you felt so unseen. And I'm like, yeah, that's a sliver. We are not one story, right? We are a galaxy of stories. It's one sliver of one piece. And many times I felt seen and heard, and she's crying. I was like, oh my gosh. Like, I always thought I was practicing my story actually with her.
That's funny.
Like, I stop crying. Yeah, so interesting.
Well, what I've experienced is telling a story about the home that we grew up in, my childhood home, to my brothers, and they're saying, you know, they have a different take on even the facts of the story, not even a different feeling about the story, but a different take on, no, it was spring and I'm like, what? No, like it was winter and it was, no. Like it was, you know, our recollection of the story are from completely different perspectives. And I think there's such value in that too, right? How you remember and how you tell a story is so revealing as to what was, who you are and what's going on for you and what you're about, right? Like, you know, so just listening for things in a story are so interesting too.
Well, no, and you know that you can come from the exact same thing and have two totally different. So you can imagine families that don't get that then fight and fight and fight about the way it was.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not helpful.
No, it doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter how it was. What matters is how you remember how it was.
Yeah.
That's what's interesting.
And then we feed our version of the story as the years go by with the information that supports how we saw it. So it's pretty cemented in.
Yeah. We become quite sure of ourselves over time. Well, this is interesting. And so you're looking at starting another group, but you're curating it in September. And so what if I'm someone who's listening to this podcast and I think, well, I really want to be part of this group, or I want to be part of a group, or I want to know more about what Adele does. What should that person do?
You please reach out and email me, Adele@adelefedorak.ca.
Okay.
I'd love to have a conversation, because that's really the fastest way in, is just to have a conversation of like where you're at, what about this is curious, what are you interested in about story, and just for me to get to know you. I'd love that. And that's kind of where I'm working at, kind of the one-on-one. But come to the Facebook group. their Facebook page, and join it. And just, I would love an interaction around story.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a place for us to meet. I have a love-hate relationship with Facebook.
Me too. Me too. So do we all. It's all, yeah, it has its uses, but man, it can be quite not useful too at times.
Totally.
Yeah. So so they can email you, they can visit the Story Edge. We'll also have your website up. I know it's under some construction and under some change.
Yes.
But we will put the link up to your website, because at some
lovely.
point people will listen to this podcast even when it is done. And you talked about working with women specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a reason why you're working with women specifically, and will that change?
That's a good question. I seem to attract women into my world, like, so that's a natural fit for me, although I have loved working with men. So I could see down the road, and I've certainly worked with men kind of in the coaching space, and also as parents of kids with speech and language difficulty. And worked with them. Men are awesome around storytelling. Yeah, when they get going with their kids with telling stories, that's where I've seen some really real magic going on. But yeah, no, it's women. That just seems to be who's in my world, and
but that's just the way it's been. But it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So if there's men out there that want to do this.
Oh my gosh, if there's a man out there who wants to do this, connect with me, please. Because I think there's so many stories that men have that we need to hear, that they need some safe space to do this work. That, yeah, so absolutely reach out to me, and I would love to have that conversation and see what goes from there.
Perfect. Well, Madame, we've been on here for a little while. So is there anything that you want to promote before we end the call?
Yeah. Oh, just simply the what we've talked about. So yeah, I'd love to, if people are interested in becoming part of a small group that works with me in the fall, connect with me, please. And I'd love to know who you are and what you're looking for.
Well, I got my hand up for September.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk more with you.
Oh my gosh, I so want to do this. It's so great. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time today, and
thank you.
Have a great week.
You too. Lovely to talk with you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hello, friends. Thanks for listening. I am your host, Maureen Towns, and I am the founder of Maureen Towns Consulting. We support families who are experiencing disruptive mental health and addictions issues go from chaos to calm. If you enjoyed this podcast, please listen, share, and subscribe. And please also know that you can reach me at maureen.towns.com, and you can reach out to me through the website, and I'm happy to chat with anybody. My work, the work that I do, is based on my 25 years working as a nurse in both the public and the private healthcare systems in Canada, as well as my facilitation and my education and my training in leadership development, as well as my experience with my own families and supporting them, all the successes and all the struggles with mental health and addictions issues. And you can read all about those issues in my upcoming book, should be released this year. Please, should be released this year. And the book is called Broken Open. So keep your eyes peeled for that and any information on that. Again, thanks for listening. Please don't forget to share and subscribe.